Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the ANA Tribal Courts webinar. Today we will be listening to two first-hand experiences of an ANA-funded project. We have one current grantee and one post-grantee who has completed their project. And we also have a guest speaker who's going to give us a little bit of an oversight of everything today in terms of tribal court status. We're going to focus in on the status of tribal courts in Alaska. But before we get into all that, we'd like to go over a few things with you. You're going to be using our BB Collaborate tools today. You're going to notice in the big white area is where we're going to be presenting all of our material. You'll be seeing the PowerPoint, which will be available to everyone at the end of the webinar. Before we get started, we'd like to ask you, if you haven't already done so, to do your audio setup wizard by clicking on the microphone at the top of the screen there. If you have headsets, select the headset in the selection. It should recognize the software for your headset. If not, just use your normal speakers. If you're calling in to use the telephone, we do have a teleconference line, as you just heard mine ring. It is there to dial in. We will provide the number if you need it. For a quick response, we have the different functions here by raising your hand. There's also how to vote. These are functions that we normally use when we are doing things like polls and whatnot. Today we're not going to be doing any polls. We're going to be listening to first-hand experiences, as I previously said, so that it's just more of an informative and giving you guys ideas. We have some tools here in the middle that allows you to do different things, such as writing on the screen, moving things around, taking a picture, loading images, and again, those tools we will not be using today. At the end of the webinar, when you leave, you're going to want to click File, scroll down to Exit, and you need to click Exit to actually exit the session. Last, in order to get your guys' questions out, you're going to need to type your questions into the chat box, and we will be recording those or keeping track of those so that we could answer those at the end of the session. We're going to hold questions until then so that we allow our presenters the time that they need to present. We are the Alaska Region Technical Assistance Center. We have our Regional Director of Anthony Chioli, who has numerous years of experience working in capital projects, fundraising, as well as municipal and tribal management styles. He used to be the tribal administrator in Quinnahock and was very influential in a lot of the things that occurred out there. Next, we have our Training and Technical Assistance Manager, Angela Kamos. She has a diverse array of experience in working with clients on executive trainings, grants management, program and project development, process improvements. She has a wide array and a great deal of knowledge on how to make things more efficient or more professional. You have myself, Charles Peel. I'm the Technology and E-Outreach Manager. My background is more business development and technology. I like to really try to work with rural communities who I feel are underserved to try to help them to best find things that are going to fit their needs. We also do maintain a very healthy pool of professionals in various areas. We want to make sure that we have experts in about as many areas as people can bring to us. We want to make sure that we are able to best serve any of the clients in our region. Here at the Alaska Region TTA Center, we offer several things for free that ANA requires that we provide you. We provide free training in project planning and development, pre-application, and post-award. So those are things that are going to help you to get into the ANA system in terms of their applying for grants, knowing how to design the grants. We also provide free technical assistance on project planning and development, pre-application. We do on-sites for people who need, our ANA grantees who need some on-site technical assistance. If you've applied for an ANA grant and unfortunately weren't funded, we do unfunded technical assistance where we help you to strengthen your application for a future funding cycle. All of this information can be found at our website at www.anaalaska.org. If you're visiting from another region and you'd like to work with somebody in your region, you could still go to our website, scroll down to the very bottom of our page, and we have each of the other regions' websites linked there, so you could actually go to another region's website. We offer several Google Plus communities to share resources. One of the most popular ones that we have is our Google Plus page for native languages. Go to the googleplus.to/ANA Alaska and look at the various Google Plus communities that we host. And last, you could go to www.acf.hhs.gov/ANA, and it'll give you it'll bring you to the ANA national page where they have a lot more resources that they talk about and would be able to further direct you to other resources. Our guest speakers for today, we have Kevin Illingworth, who is the chair for the Department of Indigenous, Community, and Tribal Programs at the University of Alaska's Interior Aleutians campus. We have Daryl Krim, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. He is the project coordinator for the Port Graham Village Council. They are a current ANA grantee. And we have Vivian Boussiere, who is the chair of the Elders Judiciary Committee for the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, their tribal court program. Those are going to be our guest presenters today, and I really encourage you guys to listen to the presenters. They have a wide variety of knowledge, and I encourage you to ask plenty of questions because these people are going to be the experts in terms of developing tribal court systems. About ANA, real quick, we want to highlight that ANA promotes the self-sufficiency for Native Americans by providing discretionary grant funding for community-based projects, as well as the training and technical assistance to eligible tribes and Native organizations. Their big vision is they want Native communities to be thriving. They want to see the healthy Native communities. We have some upcoming webinars that you guys might be interested in. We have using social media in your project. This is something that as social media continues to grow, it's going to be a way for you to kind of get the word out for your project, to gain support for your project. And it's going to be a really interesting webinar to see what is being presented. Also, we have the Highlighting Two Spirits. This is a webinar that ANA does annually, and it is a very powerful webinar. If you haven't participated in last year's webinar, I really encourage you to take a look at this webinar. It's a very moving webinar, and it deals a lot with an issue that often goes unspoken in our communities, and it's something that we need to be more aware of. So I really encourage you to attend that webinar. There's also the Native Asset Building Initiative. There's going to be a webinar on how to apply. The deadline for that application is going to be coming up, and if you're interested in applying, I really recommend. They're going to highlight a lot of the things that are very key in how to design your application for this. Last, we have how to find census information for your community. A lot of applications like to have things in there that supports their things. This is going to show you how to use the census data that the federal government collects on how to accurately document various things in your application. All of our webinars start at the same time. Alaska, we start at 11 a.m. It's going to be 3 p.m. Eastern. Check back for each of the other regions. We just want to make sure that you guys have that it always starts consistently every Thursday, same time. If you'd like to see a complete list of all of the ANA events that are coming up, please visit this web link. It will provide you a wide variety of all of the different areas coming up, both the regional TTA centers hosted webinars or any of the ANA/ACF webinars are also advertised here. We're going to have two main goals for today. First, we need to kind of provide you guys a general overview of tribal courts. We're going to be providing somebody, an expert, to tell you guys about specifically tribal court status in Alaska. And then second, we want to provide you guys with firsthand knowledge of these projects. We're going to give you a little bit of time with somebody who is currently working a tribal courts grant, as well as somebody who's successfully completed their tribal court project in the past. So we're really wanting to give you guys a well-rounded. You're going to get a little bit of an overview that's going to lead into a current project, and we're going to provide you some resources on something that somebody's completed and you guys might be able to use to kind of provide some framework if you're interested in developing one of these projects. So we have Kevin Illingworth, who is an assistant professor with the University of Alaska Tribal Management Program. He has been very influential in developing this program. He's worked very closely with us to expand the trainings that we provide. He was very influential in the Alaska Region TTA Center being able to use the Interior Aleutians Campus network to deliver our trainings on a wider scale, and we really appreciate that. And we invited Mr. Illingworth to speak with us today because this is kind of something that he is very passionate about. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Illingworth to kind of give us a general overview of tribal courts, specifically in Alaska.
Hello, Charles, can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
All right, great, thank you. Well, thank you very much for inviting me here, and just really briefly give an introduction to myself. My name is Kevin, and I am a professor at UAF in the Tribal Management Program. I was actually born outside of Alaska, North Dakota. My dad was in the Air Force, but by 8, he had been transferred to Alaska, and I grew up here in the interior and have lived my entire life in Alaska. I work with tribal courts around the state in developing tribal courts, developing tribal court codes and ordinances, and really enhancing the type of justice activities that tribes do across the state. What I'm going to be talking about tonight or today has, I guess, 3 basic parts. I want to give an overview of tribal court status in Alaska, this idea of the basics of jurisdiction, as well as the types of cases that tribes are hearing and how they're hearing cases in Alaska. So I'm going to be talking about a lot of different tribes and kind of mushing everything together. Of course, we have 229 federally recognized tribes here in Alaska, about 40% of the tribes in the United States. But tribal justice systems in Alaska are just emerging. Many of them are new. Some of them have been active for some time, but are really stepping forward and taking on more types of cases. So let's start with the basics of jurisdiction in Alaska, the status of tribal justice systems. And I use this term tribal justice because tribal court and the idea of a formal Western court doesn't often fit what's actually happening in the village at the tribal level. So I'm using that term tribal justice system just broadly to talk about all justice-related activities. So I guess the place to start is our normal system of jurisdiction under federal Indian law in the United States. And we all know that normally speaking, within reservations, within Indian country, tribes have, or there is clear tribal jurisdiction. And that's a normal way we think of jurisdiction, is that territorial base. When you're within the reservation or within Indian country, you're subject to tribal jurisdiction. When you're outside, you're subject to state jurisdiction. That's obviously an oversimplification, but with this lack of Indian country here in Alaska, it even makes things more complicated. So what we have in Alaska, because of the way land claims are settled under the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, we have a general lack of recognized Indian country here in Alaska. And in 1998, the Supreme Court held that land that went through the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act is not considered Indian country. Now all this might be turned on its head. Recently, the Department of Interior announced that they are going to be promulgating rules on how to take land into trust in Alaska. This follows a case, we're calling it the Akachak case here in Alaska, that involved several tribes that petitioned to have land put into trust were denied because they were here in Alaska. And there is a rule that says no land in Alaska can be taken into trust. That was challenged by this case, and now they won, and the Department of Interior is looking at land into trust in Alaska. For now, though, without that recognized Indian country, tribal jurisdiction in Alaska largely hinges on tribal membership. In 1999, the Alaska Supreme Court decided a case called the John versus Baker case. And in John versus Baker, the Alaska Supreme Court held that tribes in Alaska have jurisdiction over their tribal members in the area of domestic relations, even in the absence of Indian country. They said essentially Indian country doesn't matter. Tribes have jurisdiction over their members regardless of where they're located. Now this it was a huge victory and really expanded the idea of tribal jurisdiction in Alaska to not being bound to Indian country or of course with no Indian country being absent, but rather that the jurisdiction isn't confined to Indian country, that tribes in Alaska have jurisdiction over their tribal members regardless of whether they're in the village, on a reservation, or not. So what we're left with, and I'm going to categorize jurisdiction, I guess, into three categories right now here in Alaska. We have clear jurisdiction over the domestic relations of tribal members. So we have a case where clearly the Alaska Supreme Court has recognized tribal jurisdiction in the area of domestic relations over their tribal members, regardless of where those members are located. A little bit less clear is this idea of public safety, civil cases involving tribal members. Add to that, I think in this little less clear category, cases involving domestic relations when a non-native parent or other non-native is involved. The state of Alaska has been opposing jurisdiction, even though we have several cases saying that tribes do have this jurisdiction. I'll come back to that. The area that's most unclear in Alaska today, anyway, is this idea of criminal jurisdiction. In the 1999 John versus Baker case, the Alaska Supreme Court, and I'll read this quote, they say, "But the powers of self-government, including the power to prescribe and enforce internal criminal laws, are not such powers as would necessarily be lost by virtue of a tribe's dependent status." Now, any lawyer will tell you that's just dicta. The case was about domestic relations, a child custody case. But nonetheless, the Alaska Supreme Court went out of their way to say that Alaska tribes do still retain criminal jurisdiction. That being said, the state of Alaska, the executive branch, the administration has very much opposed this type of jurisdiction being exercised by tribes. And it really is less of an issue in the sense that in reality, tribes are not exercising criminal jurisdiction. First off, for a number of reasons. First, tribes have no access to any prison facilities here in Alaska. There might be small holding facilities or something at the village level, but no actual jail or prison facilities and no access to those. But more importantly, the idea of punitive jurisdiction, the idea of punishing somebody, doesn't really align with the values that people want to see expressed through their tribal justice systems. What I mean by that is most tribal courts, most tribal justice systems in Alaska really reflect a very strong restorative or rehabilitative philosophy. The idea that people make mistakes and need to be shown in a kind way how to not make that mistake again, how to do better. So I think that's probably the best way to characterize jurisdiction in Alaska today: area where we have clear jurisdiction over domestic relations, area where it's a little less clear, and then areas where we really have no consensus and that it's very unclear, this idea of criminal jurisdiction. So the types of cases that tribes are hearing, and I'm going to talk about them in that same order. For clear tribal jurisdiction, we're talking about domestic relations cases. So some examples of domestic relations cases that tribes are hearing every day across the state of Alaska. First are children's cases. So adoptions, child custody, child protection cases. These are the three most common types of cases being heard in Alaska. And like I said, every single day there are tribes hearing these children's cases in their tribal court. Add to that, of course, ICWA cases, and you've probably encompassed about 80% of what tribal courts in Alaska do. I don't think it's inaccurate to say the number one concern that communities have is the safety and the future of their children. And this really reflects this real interest in children, that these are the cases that tribes are hearing first, that this is the area where tribes asserted their authority, asserted their jurisdiction. Some other domestic relations cases, we have tribes across the state hearing marriages and divorces. Probate inheritance is becoming more and more common. And tribes are also hearing domestic violence cases. I'm not going to talk too much about Violence Against Women Act. There is some controversy here in that the Enhanced Violence Against Women, the new Violence Against Women Act, was actually not applied to Alaska. It specifically exempted Alaska, which is causing all sorts of problems, not the least of which a general decrease in the state providing full faith and credit to tribal protective orders. This is an area where we've had a lot of movement forward, and we're hoping that the state's going to come back around. An area where tribal jurisdiction is less clear, more that public safety area. We have tribes here in a lot of different cases too. I'm going to add domestic violence when the perpetrator is non-native to that list. Now, I believe under the Violence Against Women Act and how it's been enforced that tribes do have jurisdiction to protect their tribal members, that's the whole purpose of the Violence Against Women Act and of tribal protective orders. These are civil orders that are issued by the tribe and enforced by the state of Alaska, the Alaska State Troopers. The state has fully supported tribal protective orders when both parties are tribal members, and the state has even supported when the perpetrator has been a tribal member and the victim a non-native or non-tribal member. But for some reason the state has been opposing when sometimes inconsistently opposing, I should say, when the perpetrator is a non-native especially, or non-tribal member. Other cases in this area where it's less clear, but the tribes are hearing cases all the time, driving under the influence. One of the most common types of cases that tribes are hearing are DWI or DUI cases. Assault, disorderly conduct, misuse of a firearm, drug and alcohol cases, and public safety cases involving youth. These are all areas that tribes across the state are very active and may not be hearing these cases on a daily basis, but these cases come to tribal court quite frequently. Now, all these cases, I do want to say, because they deal with public safety, they may sound like they're criminal, but tribes are hearing these as civil cases and applying the law equally to everybody. Jail is not an option, but tribes are rather looking at that restorative, that helpful healing way to solve the problem. I'm not going to talk about the criminal jurisdiction again, because it's really not being exercised in Alaska right now. The final thing that I wanted to talk about are how are these cases being heard. The first question, and I think it's true to say the majority of tribes in Alaska exercise their tribal jurisdiction through their tribal council. One of the first questions is, do you want to separate your tribal court from your tribal council? Here in Alaska today, the majority of tribal court judges are the tribal council. As tribes are becoming more and more active, hearing more types of cases, we see that separation where we have either elected or appointed tribal court judges starting to occur more often. But this question of what is tribal court sometimes becomes more difficult when you to clearly see that it's tribal court activity when it's the tribal council acting, and the tribal council often acting in a preventative nature. Especially when we're talking about youth, tribes stepping in early before there's a crime been committed or before something serious has happened. When we see that youth or those parents not doing the right thing, being able to step in early. So the most common formal way that tribes are hearing cases in Alaska is probably through a panel of judges. This is particularly true in the interior region and dealing with children's cases, ICWA, child protections, adoption, child custody. And often the reason why this panel of judges, when it's the council having the panel be the council, it is just a very natural way of doing it rather than having one person make the decision. But it also, with a panel of judges, means that you have a bit more of a consensus decision making and a reflection of the makeup of the community. What I mean by that is many of our tribal communities contain multiple clans or family units that may or may not get along, may not feel like they're being represented, and having more people, the panel as a judge, means that often everybody feels represented, and this perception of fairness is expanded. We do have tribes, though, that hear cases as a single judge, so more of your typical court where the judge even sometimes wears a black robe and has a gavel. That's really the exception in Alaska, this idea of a judge wearing a black robe. But Sitka Tribe of Alaska, St. Paul, and Tlingit Haida all use this single judge. It's rare elsewhere across Alaska, but they do exist. Finally, the third common way we're seeing cases heard in Alaska is probably the least formal and least court-like of them all, and this is through circle peacemaking. Tribes are bringing cases or incidents to the community, and a circle is convened under the authority of the tribe, where the entire community, or as much of the community that wants to participate, sits in a circle and comes up with a consensus decision of what sort of consequences, what sort of outcomes are going to happen. Really talking about what happened, why it happened, the background, support for the person. I've seen a lot of these circles be very, very successful, especially working with youth, especially working with kids that don't feel that they're a part of something, that don't feel that they're really part of the community. The circle has just been such a wonderful way for people to reach out to those youth and let them know that they're cared for, that they're loved, and that they need to have respect for themselves and for everybody else too. Often how the case is heard depends on the type of case that's being heard. So some tribes do use differing procedures based on the type of case. And if it's an ICWA case, it would come before a panel of judges. If it's a case involving a youth, a safety issue, it would come before a circle, etc. Really, it's kind of difficult to generalize what tribes across Alaska are doing because they're doing so much and in so many different manners. So with that, I think that's my overview, and I will remain on the line for the question and answers at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. As he said, he will be available for specific questions at the end of the webinar, and we really appreciate the overview. Next, we will move to Daryl with the Port Graham Village Council. Daryl?
But my name is Daryl Cruin. I actually work for the Port Graham Village Council. We received an A&A governance grant 3 years ago. This is our third and final year of this project. And the A&A governance project, our project title is Reconstructing for Effective Leadership into the Future. First, I'd like to thank 3-Star and all the participants for inviting us to share our A&A project. And due to the time limit, this presentation is just a short summary of our project. I mean, it's a 3-year project, and it's entailed a lot of detailed work. But we believe that these are the steps in having a strong foundation in developing a tribal court system. We do have a tribal court system, but right now it's with our tribal council and our community population. Our tribal council tends to be also a tribal court. And with a small community, we find that there's some challenges along the way. So again, my name is Daryl Cruin. I am the coordinator for this A&A governance project in Port Graham, Alaska. I was actually born in Anchorage, and I moved down in my teens to Eastern Washington, and then moved back and forth to Alaska and Washington. And I moved here to Port Graham Village, I believe 4 years ago, to make a difference and be kind of an influence in my community. Port Graham, the Port Graham A&A Governance Project is a federally recognized, it is federally funded under the Administration for Native Americans program under the Area of Social and Economic Development Strategies, the SEDS program. This government program assists tribes with the development and implementation of projects that support and enhance tribal governing capabilities. Sorry about that. Again, the project goal is a better informed council to provide more thoughtful leadership into the future of Port Graham. And our community, the native village of Port Graham, encompasses about 5.9 square miles of land and is located on the southernmost tip of the Kenai Peninsula. This region is known as South Central Alaska. We are about 85% Aleut natives, or Sukbiak, we like to be called, which is a branch of the Aleuts. The community and council still desires to maintain their cultural identity and ties, and many members still participate in hunting and subsistence. And also we're in the process of trying to figure out ways to interwove our traditional ways of life and also the Western ways. And so this is a great opportunity for this project to hopefully fulfill that. And just kind of a short summary again of this grant. It's a 3-year grant, and when this grant was written in 2009, there was estimated about 171 community members that lived in Port Graham. This was information from the 2010 census, and of course it fluctuates from summer to winter. This grant had listed as 2 project partners and also their commitment of leverage resources to this project. So wanted committed of $61,000 in personal travel and training services and supplies to this project, and another project partner committed $2,000 in training services. The expected outcome for this 3-year grant, again, this is a very short summary, but it's the complete set of revised administrative policies procedures, a complete set of revised and updated travel ordinances, and again, a strategic plan for pursuing the establishment of a Port Graham travel court system. The objective for year 1 is to establish a process of self-monitoring and self-evaluation of the training needs. And this would be for travel counsel and office staff annually to develop a process to identify the training programs specifically for these folks. And the purpose for that is to develop a strong roles and responsibility for each group of council members and office staff. The expected benefits is to have a consistent format for the reporting progress on council members and office staff's abilities in relation to their positions, meaning a defined roles and responsibility, and expected that this process, as you develop this objective, would lead to other areas of reporting project and program progresses. So the activities for our objective 1 to start was recruiting a committee to help with the following projects. So the first year was the legwork for developing first a project survey of the travel membership to measure the level of confidence that their council members and admin staff are up to date with their knowledge and roles and responsibility as a travel government. Now that sounds kind of easy, but when it comes down to sitting down and creating this with the committee, it was a lot of work. We also, in developing the survey, we had to develop a status needs assessment tool to assist the full training needs of council members and office staff, which was a great activity. But again, like I said, it took up a lot of time within that first year. Some of the other activities too that needed to be done to start this legwork was based on the newly developed, personal assessment tool. We had to determine and schedule the most effective, relevant, and economic means to provide trainings based on their personal assessments. And also with developing a personal assessment, we had to develop criteria for evaluating the effectiveness of these trainings that they received and we scheduled. So we had to measure how well these trainings were accepted and how much was learned through these processes. Objective 2 for year 2, by the end of year 2, we need to have complete the trainings of all the council members and office staff with follow-up training to schedule for year 3. So pretty much the first year, year 1, was developing the paperwork or developing the assessment tool, the evaluation tool, developing a community survey, scheduling all the trainings that based on their personal assessments to make sure that everybody was up to date on the roles and responsibilities for council members and office staff. So the expected benefits for year 2 was complete training. And schedule for the first 12 months, and schedule training, follow-up trainings for year 3 of this project. So year 2 objectives, the activities. So based on these trainings, we made all travel arrangements for off-site trainings, and we solicited also for on-site trainings, meaning, there's specific trainings we can send out But also just to utilize our monies better, we solicited for on-site trainings because we hit a broader amount of folks. Say we have 7 council members, so to bring somebody in just made sense to have trainers come in and hit all of our council members versus sending 1 or 2 council members out. And in that process, we had to evaluate the effectiveness of trainings. So utilizing the evaluation forms we developed to determine what areas we needed to have follow-up trainings, because these are pretty in-depth on roles and responsibilities. In the meantime, we also involved the community in presenting these evaluations or recommendations to its membership. And so based on the evaluations, again, we had to schedule additional follow-up trainings for year 3. So the objective or goal for year 3 was to have the complete review of existing tribal bylaws, tribal ordinances, and admin policy procedures. And the goal for year 3 also was to have a strategic plan for pursuing the establishment of a program court system. Again, we do have one, but we wanted to make sure we can separate council from tribal court system. So there's no conflict of interest between families, especially again in a small community. So the expected benefits, to have 100% of our tribal bylaws and ordinances and our administrative policy procedures reviewed and to determine what is relevant and what is current. And again, to have a strategic plan in place for establishing a program tribal court system. So some of the activities for year 2 and year 3 for these objectives was we solicited for a third-party contractor to review all our tribal bylaws and ordinances, policy procedures, and then also the preparation of a recommendation report with the assistance of rewriting these ordinances. Like some tribal communities some of their policy procedures and bylaws are outdated or need to be updated and or rewritten. For this, we needed to recruit for a tribal court committee to assist with these reviewing processes, and to help communicate between the third-party contractor. The committee helped with relaying the information to the council member and the council members and the tribal membership. And again, our project partners will provide assistance in working close with the committee and the council to assist in development of templates in rewriting and or updating these policies and procedures. Another Objective 3 or goal activity was a recommendations report from our third-party contractor to be presented to our tribal council and the tribal membership. Our tribal ordinances, based on input from the council, to have these rewritten or updated, the ordinances as necessary. And for our tribal court system, based on the report and input from the council and tribal membership, that the council would develop a plan addressing these options to pursue funding from relevant agencies to devote to the establishment of program tribal court system. Continue some of the activities. We have to present to the council and membership for review and comments, and adopt and incorporate of comments from the recommendation report. And also another activity, we have to publish all adopted policies and procedures. And then once those are adopted, we have our project partners that would assist in providing training on our newly developed policy procedures or updated policy procedures for all office staff and council members. And then finally, a development of a post-project survey of the tribal membership to measure the success of this project, to make sure that we included everybody that we needed in the community as community and tribal membership. Some of the training or some of the challenges, I mean, there's a lot of little challenges here and there for especially a small community. One of them was the scheduling of trainings to have trainings completed, and that was definitely a challenge, especially when we live in a remote village We're about 30 air miles south of Homer. The only way in and out is either by a 206 Cessna or 207 Cessna 6-seater, or from May to September is by a boat or skiff. So the skiff can take 1 hour, a plane usually takes 15-20 minutes, and of course all the weather challenges that we do have. So say second year we had about $67,000 in just travel and training, and that was a challenge to get that scheduled and make sure we can utilize every bit of monies to have trainers come in or have staff and council members travel out. So that was probably one of the biggest challenges. We did have many other challenges, say from say the project narrative. After rereading it over and over, the pre and post survey was not actually in our activities, and so we had to create an amendment to have that added. You know, one of the hints on some of these and making sure that the activities are completed by their anticipated or the completion due date, because you can have one activity that can create a domino effect and affect your whole entire project, having delays, you know, especially for unforeseen challenges, and it can have a ripple effect, a large ripple effect in a very small community versus a larger city. And you know, some of the other challenges is a limited labor pool, and the talent pool is very limited in smaller communities. So a lot of thought has to be put into this. Say when we wrote the grant, the estimated affected, this grant would affect, our population was about 171. The current population is about 115 with 40 youth and 27 elders. So that would leave the population from 18 to 54 years is 48 people. When we first created the first survey in 2012, we had 79 local tribal members, which is, again, our tribal membership survey is different from a tribal community or our community survey. So those were some of the challenges there. And I'm not myself or my committee are not whizzes at creating surveys from scratch. So we utilized a lot of information from project partners, what worked, what didn't. So our project sustainability and contingency plan for this project is that once all the initial trainings have been conducted and the evaluation process has been completed, the evaluation of the effectiveness of all these trainings that council members and office staff have been through, the new policy procedures that are in place, and then project partners or partnerships with funding agencies and regional partners have been established throughout these trainings. The training for new staff will be provided in-house or with funding agency technical assistance staff like project partners or like through 3-Star. These will be annual training events that will be explored and addressed as new council members are elected and new staff is hired. But also too that once the tribal bylaws and ordinances have been rewritten and deemed necessary, a program tribal court system or system strategic plan had been developed and accepted by this. The Port Graham Village Council would pursue additional funds through appropriate resources such as the U.S. Department of Justice and possibly the BIA to fully establish the Port Graham Tribal Court system. It was a lot to cover for a 3-year grant, a governance project. I mean, these I believe are, and the council believes that these are the steps in laying the foundation. Once you have all your policy procedures, your travel ordinances, and travel bylaws in order, that is the great foundation to setting up your travel court system. So, you know, the reason why we did that is a lot of the ordinances were outdated and you have conflict of families and, you know, so especially in a small community, I believe it's this is something that I think will work for a lot of the communities out there. So thank you again. If you have any questions, I have my email posted right there in the beginning and my office phone number too. So thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. It was quite an extensive look at your guys' project. And hopefully a couple of people were taking notes because they have provided you guys with a complete framework of how they design their project and the goals of their project. So it would really help to kind of frame out some of your guys' projects if you guys were looking at doing this for your ANA project. Next, we'll move on to Vivian, and she is with the Mashpee Wampanoag. Vivian, are you online?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Charles. My name is Vivian Boussiere. I am a member of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe in Massachusetts. I am also the chair of the Elders Judiciary Committee. There are 7 of us, and we were given the task to develop tribal court. We are the guardians and overseers of tribal court. Our tribal court is a separate but equal branch of government, so tribal council does not have anything to do with our tribal court. We are a new court. We were developed in 2008 with our judicial ordinance, and we have been fortunate enough to be awarded an ANA grant in September of 2011. Our ANA grant was very ambitious, and we sought to develop the infrastructure for our tribal court and also educate our tribal members on the court processes. We also developed a website and a number of other projects that I'm not going to focus on today, but we'll be focusing on what we felt was the most important aspect of what we developed through the funding of our grant. So if we can move on a little bit, I think we should start with the rules of civil procedure. We were operating under the federal rules of civil procedure, and if anyone has ever seen them, it is a very large book that confuses lawyers. Most of our people like to represent themselves in court, and we felt that they should have the knowledge to do so if they wanted to. So before we could do that, we had to develop our own civil procedures for our Mashpee Wampanoag Tribal Court that were appropriate for our people. So we had partners with the Suffolk University Law School. They have an Indian Law and Indigenous Peoples Clinic. They were our leverage resource who were able to look into how other tribes develop their rules of civil procedure. After we developed a formal booklet of rules of civil procedure for our court, we developed other rules as well, appellate rules and rules of evidence. But we decided that for our folks to be comfortable with our court system and knowledgeable, we needed to develop something that would be easy for them to access and read. So we developed a pro se guidebook. And I believe there is a link that you can hit on that will take you to our Mashpee Wampanoag District Court site, and you will see how we developed this pro se guidebook. The rules of civil procedure were developed in a fairly simple language, but the pro se guidebook touches upon the really important aspects of the court process. And one of the most important part of the court process is the timing and understanding the basic steps to a lawsuit, if that's what you want to do. We hear civil cases, so most of our cases are member versus member. We do not have land into trust, so we do not hear criminal cases. We have a fairly busy court, but we also have an alternative to regular court. We also have a peacemaker court that we are developing that is more traditional for our people, and we find it's also used as well as the more formal court. So I hope this has been helpful. I would like folks to look at our website, to look at our Pro Se guidebook. We'll be putting guidebooks out for our tribal members in all aspects so that they can continue to understand the court and feel comfortable if they have to go to court with the process that's presented before them. It can be terribly intimidating. So that's about it for us. Charles?
Thank you. Actually, here is the contact information. The email is actually Vivian's email address. They have the phone numbers, so you could call their office and ask any more specific questions. And this is their contact information for their tribal court system. We've come to the end of the session. We're going to open up for questions and answers. So if you guys have any questions, please type them into the chat box where Anthony has been pushing out the web links for you guys. And normally right about now we'd have actually Richard Glass saying thank you guys for participating, and he really likes to put these on to keep you guys informed. Unfortunately, Richard is not here today, but we'd like to echo that and make sure that to let you guys know that we really do appreciate you guys coming to these webinars and participating. We put these on for you guys, so any feedback that you guys provide us will help us to shape any of the webinars that we go forward with in the future. So take a few minutes. Anthony has pushed out the link for our survey. It takes a few minutes, and just take a few minutes, fill that out, and provide us some feedback. Do we have any questions for our presenters? The recording for this webinar will be made available. What we do is we make this 508 compliant so that it has the closed captioning. It takes a couple of days for us to get the transcripts completed, and we will be pushing it out. Not only will it be advertised on our website that Anthony has provided there, but we also publish it in YouTube as well. So you could find it in several different locations. We will be sending out a copy of the PowerPoint. We'll send it out in a PDF form for everybody to be able to take a look at and incorporate their notes into. So we'll send that out shortly after the webinar is completed. We'll give it one more minute for questions, and if there's no questions, we'll close the session. Well, I would like to thank everybody for joining us today again. And a special thank you to our three presenters. We really appreciate the knowledge that you've shared with us. It's not often that people take time out of their day to share their projects or provide insight to their stuff. One of the sites that we didn't get to talk about was Kevin's website for the program that he runs at the Interior Aleutians campus. I will make a note of that on our PowerPoint that we send out, just so that you guys are able to take a look at his information. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording and we will be done. Thank you guys.